There's a story that haunts me about a young marine biology student named Anthony White. He was researching surf spots driven by his love for the ocean when he made a fateful decision. He paddled out to a remote break, lured by the promise of perfect waves. What he didn't realize was that he was near a massive seal rookery. He ignored the warning signs, the ominous silence that fell over the water. And then, a great white shark attacked. The summer of 2014 brought perfect weather to Surf Beach, California. Sunshine filtered through the morning mist, painting golden patterns in the glassy ocean surface. Anthony White, 22, and his passion for surfing were exactly what you'd expect from a California marine biology student. The young man had been surfing for 8 years, and his friends described him as the perfect match of fearless adventure and deep respect for ocean life. Anthony was known for his infectious enthusiasm and tendency to seek out remote breaks, while his academic side was more methodical, always researching surf spots and ocean conditions before paddling out. He had spent weeks planning this solo dawn patrol session, and this morning adventure was meant to be the perfect combination of his two passions, surfing and marine biology. The college student had arrived at Surf Beach just as the sun was rising, spending his first hour checking conditions and waxing his board at the remote location. But Anthony had been restless, telling other early morning surfers that the real waves were beyond the crowded spots, despite the area being adjacent to a massive seal rookery at Point Conception. On that fateful morning, Anthony set out early, carrying his 6.2 shortboard and minimal safety gear. He had signed the beach access log indicating he planned to surf the main break. But somewhere along the way, Anthony spotted what looked like perfect waves breaking further offshore. Despite the prominent warning signs about marine life in the area, Anthony paddled out 150 yards from shore to position himself in the lineup. The area was beautiful, too beautiful to resist, with seals barking in the distance and crystal clear water revealing the sandy bottom below. While setting up for the perfect wave, Anthony suddenly noticed something that should have alarmed him. The water was unusually quiet, with no other surfers in sight, and the seals had stopped their constant chatter. But he was so focused on catching the wave of the day that Anthony ignored these warning signs. Finally, Anthony had positioned himself perfectly in the lineup and was sitting on his board, legs dangling in the water. Then suddenly, a terrifying silence fell over the ocean. Out of nowhere, there it was. A massive great white shark emerging from the depths 20 feet below where Anthony was sitting. What Anthony didn't realize was that he had entered the domain of one of nature's most efficient predators. Great whites are living fossils that have remained virtually unchanged for millions of years. Their torpedo-shaped bodies perfectly designed for explosive attacks. These apex predators can detect blood from up to 500 yards away and sense the electrical impulses of a beating heart from several meters' distance. When hunting, great whites approach from the depths in explosive bursts of speed exceeding 35 km/h, using the element of surprise to deliver devastating attacks with bite forces reaching up to 4,000 pounds per square inch. Anthony reacted instantly, but there was nowhere to run. The massive predator struck from directly below, covering the distance between them in a split second. Anthony managed to see the shark's massive form just before impact, but the attack came with such explosive force that both he and his surfboard were launched into the air. The sound of Anthony's screams cut through the morning silence as the shark's jaws clamped down on his torso. He fought desperately, punching at the predator's snout as it held him in its powerful grip, the massive head shaking violently as razor-sharp teeth sliced through flesh and bone. The great white released Anthony after several seconds, typical behavior for these predators when encountering unfamiliar prey. But the damage was already catastrophic. Blood immediately began clouding the pristine water as Anthony, despite his severe injuries, began paddling frantically toward shore on his damaged board. The shark circled below, following the blood trail but maintaining its distance, waiting to see if this strange prey would weaken enough to approach safely. Anthony managed to cover nearly half the distance to shore, his movements becoming weaker and more erratic as blood loss and shock overwhelmed his system. A jogger on the beach heard Anthony's desperate screams and immediately called for help. But the remote location meant rescue was still minutes away. By the time lifeguards arrived, Anthony had disappeared beneath the surface, the ocean swallowing him whole. 2 hours later, Anthony's mangled surfboard washed ashore, bearing the unmistakable crescent-shaped bite marks of a great white shark. The massive gouges told the story of an encounter with one of nature's most efficient predators. Anthony's body was never recovered despite extensive search efforts. The university established a memorial scholarship in his name, and Surf Beach was temporarily closed while marine biologists studied great white activity in the area. The attack led to enhanced warning systems and additional safety briefings for surfers. As the sun set over the California coastline, the memory of Anthony White served as a stark reminder. I've spent years studying the ocean's most dangerous predators, but some stories still haunt me. The story of David Walter is one of those. A young charter captain, full of life and chasing the American dream, vanished in a terrifying instant, a stark reminder of the ocean's unforgiving power. The morning of September 3, 2015, dawned with perfect conditions in Galveston Bay, Texas. The sky was a brilliant blue canvas stretching over the Gulf Coast, with just enough offshore breeze to create ideal fishing conditions. David Walter, just 26, couldn't have asked for better weather to take 4 tourists from Dallas on their dream fishing trip. David was the kind of entrepreneur who embodied the American dream. A first-generation immigrant, he had built his charter business from nothing. His clients loved his infectious enthusiasm and his knack for finding fish in any conditions. Friends described him as methodical and safety-conscious, always checking his equipment twice, but driven by an almost obsessive desire to give his customers the perfect fishing experience. The Dallas tourists were celebrating a bachelor party, and David had promised them action in the productive waters near the Galveston jetties. They'd spent the first few hours pulling in red snapper and speckled trout, David expertly managing the boat as the cooler filled with their catch. He navigated to his favorite spot, just 1 mile offshore, where the depth dropped to 25 feet, attracting schools of bait fish and the predators that hunted them. The tourists were having the time of their lives, already talking about booking another trip. But as they prepared to move to a new location for the afternoon bite, disaster struck. The boat's engine coughed, sputtered, and died completely, leaving them drifting in the strong Gulf current toward the busy shipping channel. David immediately diagnosed the problem: a clogged fuel filter, which should have been a simple fix. But as he worked on the engine, the boat's anchor began dragging in the powerful current. The situation was becoming dangerous, and David knew he had to act fast. Local charter captains had warned about recent unusual activity in the area, but such warnings were common in Texas waters. The water had been murky since recent storms, making it harder to see what might be lurking beneath the surface. David had fished these waters for years without incident, and he reasoned that the popular fishing spot would be safe with other boats nearby. With his clients growing nervous, David made a fateful decision. He stripped down and dove overboard to manually reset the anchor, hoping to stabilize their position while he fixed the engine. What David didn't know was that he had entered the hunting grounds of one of the Gulf's most dangerous predators, the bull shark. These sharks are among the most adaptable killers in the ocean, equally at home in salt water and fresh water. They possess specialized kidneys that allow them to regulate salt levels in their blood, enabling them to swim far up rivers and into freshwater lakes where other sharks cannot survive. This means bull sharks can appear virtually anywhere there's water, from the open ocean to golf course ponds miles inland. Their aggressive temperament and willingness to investigate anything in their territory makes them responsible for more unprovoked attacks on humans than any other species except great whites. With a bite force of 1,350 lbs per square inch and electroreceptors that can detect electrical fields from several meters away, bull sharks employ a relentless bite and release pattern, striking multiple times with the tenacity of a pit bull until their prey stops moving. David worked underwater to free the stuck anchor, but the current was stronger than expected, and the anchor had become wedged in debris. The 7-foot bull shark had been patrolling the fishing grounds for hours, drawn by the chum slick created by David's successful charter. The predator's incredibly acute senses detected the electrical fields generated by David's rapidly beating heart and the scent of blood from hundreds of yards away. What happened next occurred with shocking speed. David never saw the shark coming through the murky water. The bull shark struck from behind, its massive jaws clamping down on his leg with crushing force before immediately releasing and circling for another attack. The impact was so violent that David's clients heard his muffled scream through the water. David fought desperately to reach the surface, but the bull shark continued its relentless assault. True to their species' aggressive nature, the predator struck again and again, each bite tearing away more flesh. The shark's persistence was terrifying. Once committed to an attack, bull sharks rarely give up, continuing until their prey stops moving. The multiple attacks created a feeding frenzy mentality, and the murky water became a churning mass of blood and violence. David's clients watched in horror as the water around their boat turned red. They screamed for help and radioed the Coast Guard, but David had already disappeared beneath the surface, overwhelmed by the bull shark's relentless assault. The Coast Guard arrived nearly an hour later, finding only David's torn shorts floating in a blood-stained water. The bull shark had vanished into the murky depths, leaving behind only traumatic memories for 4 witnesses. There's a story they tell in every boating safety course along the Texas coast. It's a cautionary tale about a charter business that died along with its owner, David, after he disappeared. His body was never recovered, but while the Gulf's bull sharks hunt in murky shallows thousands of miles away in Hawaii, another predator was about to show why it's earned the most terrifying nickname in the ocean. This time, the attack would happen under cover of darkness, where even paradise becomes a hunting ground. The evening of April 22nd, 2016, brought perfect conditions to the remote coastline near Hana, Maui. A gentle trade wind rustled through the palm trees as the sun painted the sky in brilliant tropical colors. 24-year-old Christian Smith couldn't have asked for better conditions for his solo fishing adventure at one of his secret spots along Maui's untouched coastline. Christian embodied the laid-back Hawaiian lifestyle that drew so many to the islands. He had an easy smile and an encyclopedic knowledge of hidden fishing spots, which had made him a local favorite at the surf shop where he worked. Friends described him as fearless and independent, always venturing to remote locations that other anglers avoided, constantly searching for the perfect fishing experience that only the islands could provide. That evening, Christian loaded his truck with heavy tackle designed for the large predatory fish that hunted Hawaiian waters after dark. The location he'd chosen was breathtakingly beautiful, but completely isolated. A secluded beach accessible only by a rough dirt road winding through dense tropical vegetation. Christian arrived just as darkness was settling over the ocean. The spot was perfect, a protected cove with deep water close to shore and a coral reef that attracted schools of bait fish during night hours. He set up his gear methodically, rigging the heavy equipment he'd need for the monsters that prowled these waters after sunset. Christian waded into it about 6 feet of crystal clear water to cast beyond the reef break. Everything seemed perfect. The water was so clear he could see the white sand bottom, even in starlight. He'd already landed 2 nice fish when disaster struck. Moving through the water to reposition for a better cast, Christian's foot slipped on wet volcanic rock. He fell hard against sharp coral formations, opening a deep gash on his leg. Blood immediately began streaming into the pristine water around him. Local Hawaiian fishermen had warned about increased predator activity during night hours, but Christian had fished these waters countless times. What he didn't know was that the remote location had become a hunting ground for one of the ocean's most dangerous predators. As Christian tried to assess his injury in the dim light, he realized the cut was deeper than expected. His splashing and the metallic scent of blood created the perfect storm of stimuli that trigger a predator's hunting instincts. Unknown to Christian, he had attracted the attention of Hawaii's apex predator, the tiger shark. They are perfectly adapted for nighttime hunting in both shallow and deep waters, earning the nickname waste basket of the sea because they'll eat virtually anything. Their stomachs have contained license plates, tires, and even other sharks. These massive sharks can grow up to 18 feet long and possess an indiscriminate appetite that makes them particularly deadly during nighttime hours when they move into shallow water to hunt. Tiger sharks can detect blood from several hundred yards away, and their lateral line system senses the slightest vibrations in the water, making escape nearly impossible once they lock onto a target. Christian began wading toward shore, but his movements became increasingly erratic as blood loss affected his coordination. The coral cut was more serious than he'd thought, and the metallic scent drifting through the water was like ringing a dinner bell for every predator in the area. A 10-foot tiger shark had been patrolling the reef edge when Christian's blood trail reached its sensitive nostrils. Unlike more cautious reef sharks, tiger sharks are known for their bold, reckless approach to anything in their territory, especially during nighttime hunting hours when they become most active. Christian never saw death coming through the dark water. The attack was sudden and devastating. The tiger shark struck from the side, its massive jaws clamping down on his injured leg with crushing force. The impact knocked Christian off his feet, sending him tumbling in the deeper water. The predator's attack was relentless and indiscriminate. Tiger sharks are known for their tenacious grip, often holding prey while using their muscular bodies to roll and tear. The shark maintained its grip while striking with its powerful tail, creating a whirlpool of violence. What makes tiger shark attacks particularly horrific is their feeding behavior. Once they taste blood, they enter a feeding frenzy, biting repeatedly until prey stops moving. Christian fought desperately, but the predator's grip was unbreakable, and each movement only intensified the attack. In the darkness, I've spent years studying the intersection of human lives and the vast, indifferent ocean. Sometimes the stories I uncover stay with me long after I close the books. Christian's screams on that remote Hawaiian beach, they echoed across the empty coastline, unheard. The tiger shark, driven by its indiscriminate appetite, left him no escape. When morning arrived, all that remained was his truck, parked at the end of the dirt road, his fishing gear still on the beach. Christian was gone, claimed by the waters he loved. A massive search, involving helicopters and countless volunteers, ultimately recovered his body 4 days later, 8 miles away. The Hawaiian community honored him with a traditional blessing ceremony, and his surf shop colleagues established a memorial fund dedicated to ocean safety education. But the ocean's dangers aren't confined to Hawaii. Off the rugged northern California coast, the same species of shark that took Anthony White was about to demonstrate that even the most experienced watermen are never truly safe from the ocean's most intelligent and adaptable predators. November 8, 2017, dawned crisp and clear at Fort Ross, Northern California. The morning fog lifted, revealing a dramatic, rocky coastline where Pacific swells crashed against ancient sea stacks. For Ryan Walsh, 29, it was perfect diving weather. Calm seas and good visibility promised a profitable day. Harvesting abalone. Ryan was a commercial abalone diver, a dangerous profession. His weathered hands and sun-damaged face spoke of 6 years spent in the frigid Pacific, free diving to depths that would terrify recreational divers. He was known as methodical and safety-conscious, yet driven by a relentless pursuit of the perfect abalone beds hidden in those rocky depths. That morning, Ryan launched his small boat with his dive partner, Marcus, a younger diver who looked up to him as a mentor. They'd worked together for 3 seasons, developing the unspoken communication that comes from facing shared dangers in one of California's most hazardous occupations. Ryan chose a productive rocky reef in 25 feet of water. It was a challenging location, known for strong currents, kelp forests, and the ever-present threat of entanglement in abandoned fishing nets. As Ryan suited up in his thick wetsuit, he felt the familiar mix of excitement and apprehension. The water temperature was a bone-chilling 55 degrees, but he'd grown accustomed to it over the years. His dive bag held his abalone iron, measuring gauge, and collection bag, the tools of his dangerous trade. The first few dives went perfectly. Ryan descended through the kelp canopy to the rocky bottom, where clusters of red abalone clung like living jewels. His experienced eye identified the legal specimens, and his practiced hands pried them loose with surgical precision. But on his 7th dive, disaster struck. While working to free a particularly large abalone, Ryan's fin became entangled in abandoned fishing nets. The nearly invisible monofilament wrapped around his leg like a spider's web, holding him against the rocky bottom as his air supply dwindled. After a desperate struggle, he managed to cut through enough netting to break free. He made an emergency ascent, his lungs burning as he fought through the kelp toward the sunlight. When he finally surfaced, he was exhausted, disoriented, and dangerously far from his boat. He didn't realize that his distressed movements had attracted the attention of California's apex predator, the great white shark. These living fossils have patrolled these waters for millions of years. Perfectly adapted to hunt in the kelp forest where seals and sea lions gather, these massive sharks typically reach 12 to 16 feet and can weigh over 3,000 pounds. Their torpedo-shaped bodies are capable of explosive bursts exceeding 35 meters, launching them completely out of the water. Their incredible sensory system allows them to detect electrical fields from several meters away and track blood trails from 500 yards. During autumn, mature great whites patrol northern California in greater numbers, following the migration patterns of their preferred prey. These sharks are incredibly intelligent, capable of learning and adapting hunting strategies, making them unpredictable and extremely dangerous to humans who venture into their territory. Marcus, watching from 300 yards away, immediately recognized that something was wrong. Ryan was floating motionless at the surface, clearly in distress. Marcus started the engine and raced toward his partner, but the distance seemed impossibly far. The 13-foot great white had been patrolling the kelp beds when it detected Ryan's emergency ascent. The shark's acute senses picked up the electrical impulses from his rapidly beating heart, the scent of abalone in his collection bag, and the erratic movements of a creature in distress. All triggers activating predatory instincts. Ryan never saw the attack coming. The great white struck from below with devastating force, its massive jaws clamping down on his torso with a bite force reaching 4,000 pounds per square inch, slicing through his wetsuit and into vital organs. The shark's initial bite was exploratory, typical great white behavior with unfamiliar prey, but the damage was already catastrophic. The predator released Ryan and circled back, following the blood. I've always been haunted by the story of Ryan. A scream echoing across the water, strength fading from blood loss. It's a sound I can almost hear in my mind. He was a diver, attacked by a great white while hunting abalone off the California coast. Despite desperate efforts, he died from massive blood loss just 20 minutes later. Ryan's partner, Marcus, pulled him from the water, but it was too late. The Coast Guard arrived, but far too late. His death sent shockwaves through the diving community. New safety regulations were implemented, and Marcus became a dive safety instructor. The abalone beds were temporarily closed while biologists studied the great white activity. But while those great whites patrolled the kelp forests of Northern California, hundreds of miles south in Florida, a similar tragedy was about to unfold. This time, it involved a spearfishing competition, crystal clear water, and a predator about to turn the event into a feeding frenzy. It was August 14, 2013, and the conditions at Jupiter Inlet, Florida, were perfect. The morning sun sparkled on the Atlantic waters, and gentle swells created ideal visibility for the annual South Florida spearfishing tournament. Alex Paul, a 33-year-old construction foreman from Miami, couldn't have asked for better conditions. He was a passionate free diver, spending weekends honing his skills in the crystal clear waters. He wasn't a professional, but his athleticism and experience earned him respect. That morning, Alex joined 40 other competitors. The target species included cobia, kingfish, and grouper, all prized game fish. Alex had scouted extensively and identified promising spots. The competition began at sunrise, and Alex and his dive buddy Carlos headed to a productive reef in 30 feet of water. For 2 hours, Alex had moderate success, but as the morning progressed, he became focused on finding a trophy fish. Then he spotted a massive cobia, easily 50 pounds, cruising the reef edge. He knew he'd found his target. He hyperventilated to extend his bottom time, then dove to intercept the fish. His shot was perfect, striking just behind the gills, but the wounded fish immediately took off for deeper water. In his excitement, Alex became separated from Carlos and the other divers, finding himself alone in an isolated section of the reef. The wounded cobia's struggle created a significant blood trail as Alex fought to control the powerful fish. When he finally surfaced with his prize, he was bleeding from cuts caused by the sharp fins and exhausted from the underwater battle. The combination of fish blood and human blood, along with the struggles of the dying cobia, created the perfect stimuli, triggering the predatory instincts of every shark in the vicinity. Alex didn't realize that he had attracted one of Florida's most dangerous predators, the bull shark. Bull sharks are perfectly adapted to Florida's warm coastal waters. These powerful hunters typically reach 6 to 8 feet and have specialized kidneys that allow them to survive in both salt water and fresh water. Their incredible sensory systems allow them to detect vibrations from struggling fish hundreds of yards away and sense electrical fields from several meters distance. Unlike other shark species, bull sharks are known for their bold, direct approach to potential food sources, often competing directly with spear fishermen for their catch. Their aggressive nature and opportunistic feeding behavior, combined with their ability to strike repeatedly, makes them one of the most feared predators in American waters. A 7-foot bull shark had been patrolling the reef when the scent of blood reached its nostrils from hundreds of yards away. The predator's acute senses detected the electrical fields generated by both the struggling fish and Alex's rapidly beating heart. Alex saw the shark approaching and tried releasing his catch, hoping to distract it with the wounded cobia. But bull sharks are opportunistic feeders with insatiable appetites, and multiple potential prey items only intensified their aggressive behavior instead of taking the offered cobia. The water turned crimson so quickly. It's a scene I've read about countless times, and each time it feels impossibly vivid. Alex, a respected member of the spearfishing community, was struck by a bull shark. The jaws clamped down on his leg with crushing force. Major blood vessels were severed. Multiple strikes caused massive tissue damage. He fought desperately, punching at the shark's snout, trying to reach his dive knife. But the bull shark continued its relentless assault. Divers, alerted by the commotion and the spreading blood, raced toward Alex. They found him floating unconscious, his spear gun and wounded cobia drifting nearby. The bull shark had vanished. Despite immediate first aid and a Coast Guard helicopter evacuation, Alex died from massive blood loss during the 40-minute flight to the trauma center. The tournament was canceled, and the spearfishing community mourned. Alex's death, as tragic as it was, led to enhanced safety protocols in tournaments. New requirements mandated closer proximity to dive buddies, and organizers began providing emergency response training. A memorial fund was established, promoting safer diving practices in his name.